Israel Adesanya.
28-0!
McGregor announcing
about a guy who
What's up, the homies? Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again for another UFC full card breakdown and predictions video. This one's going to be Alistair Overeem taking on Volkov. Really good main event, really difficult prediction to make. As always, there's a bunch of decent matchups underneath that main event too. Before we get into making predictions and breaking down fights though, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, we've got to mention it, right? Massive shout out to Mr. Louisiana, Dustin Poirier. That man went in there and did something that no one has done to Conor McGregor yet. Silk pajamas or not, no one has done that to Conor McGregor. You know, bit by bit, Dustin Poirier put it together. You know, he got that early takedown. He was able to grapple against the fence and then started investing in the low kicks. Eventually found that knockout punch. You know, bit by bit, just putting the puzzle together. Dustin Poirier, man, what a guy. Alright homies, let's get into breaking these ones down. Ode Osbourne taking on Jerome Rivera, and we're going to start with Ode. So Ode comes into this matchup 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Originally supposed to fight the newcomer, Denis Bonda, and I quite like Denis for that matchup too. But now Ode has a new opponent on really short notice. Ode's debut didn't go too well. He was submitted by the veteran, Brian Kelleher. This time round though, he does have an opponent that's much more suited to his current skill level. Jerome Rivera, now 0-2 inside the UFC, getting a real quick turnaround after his loss to Figueiredo's brother just a few days ago. Rivera kinda disappointed me in that matchup. I'm glad he did because I picked Figueiredo. The thing that disappointed me the most was how fatigued Figueiredo was in that last round, and Jerome Rivera just didn't push down on the gas pedal. Still gave too much respect to Figueiredo. Ode Osbourne has some pretty okay BJJ from off his back, similar to what Figueiredo had. I do believe the fight could go either way, but it seems like a slightly better matchup for Ode than it does Rivera. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to take Ode Osbourne via decision. Now my numbers would be Ode minus 140, Rivera plus 120. And the actual numbers, Ode minus 170, minus 180. So yeah, I kind of agree with that. Not too far from the actual numbers. Rivera coming in plus 160. I think if Rivera can use that kicking style that he likes to use on the feet, maybe he can find his first win. But, you know, if this goes to the mat, Ode has some good BJJ. And Ode isn't too bad on the feet too. So, could play out pretty close, but I slightly favour Ode Osbourne. Youssef Zalal taking on Sung Woo Choi. And we're going to start with Youssef. So Youssef comes into this matchup 3 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Primarily a striker. Youssef is one of my favourite fighters. I really do like this guy. His movement orientated style. One of the best at implementing a stick and move type style. His style wasn't good enough in his last fight. But we do have to give a lot of credit to the well-rounded Tapira for being able to beat Youssef Zalal. Despite that loss, I think Zalal actually showed us just how good his wrestling and ground game is. Refused to give up in many situations that a few fighters would. For me, there was positives in that loss. The opponent, Sung Woo Choi, comes into this matchup 1 win, 2 losses inside the UFC. It's been a while since we've seen this guy. He hasn't exactly shown a super high level at any point. Out-wrestled by Evloev and Gavin Tucker. I wouldn't be confident in saying that Zalal will also put a wrestling clinic on against Choi. Maybe Choi is the guy who's looking to level change, looking to grapple. The real difference for me is that swagger, you know. Zalal's style, I'm a fan of it, man. I think Zalal uses that stick and move type style, avoids getting stuck up against the fence, or even if he does entertain a wrestling match, I think he could compete there. But overall, I think Zalal is going to use that striking, is going to comfortably be able to move around Choi and just implement his type of fighting. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to take Yusuf Zalal via decision. My numbers would be Yusuf -170, Choi +140. Now the reason I don't price it a little bit deeper, it is the smaller octagon, right? So if Choi is able to push Zalal up against the fence, it could be a job well done from Choi. I wouldn't make Yusuf a big favourite purely because it is the small octagon. So although I am favouring the style, the stick and move style with a lot of movement, I wouldn't be super surprised if it didn't go down that way. Now the actual numbers, if I can find them, we've got Yusuf Zalal -250, -240. Choi coming back +200. So a lot of respect going on Yusuf Zalal. Rightfully so. You know, this guy has a great style, a lot of movement, and only one guy has been able to keep up. Can Choi do it? I'm not too sure. But it's the smaller octagon that is in his favour. For me though, I'm going to take Yusuf Zalal. Molly Mccann taking on Lara Procopio. And we're going to start with Molly. So Molly comes into this matchup 4 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a scrapper. This woman loves to throw down, tough as nails, just a proper fighter. Her technique doesn't stand out as much as her heart does, but the technique is coming. I would say the main reason for Molly losing her last fight would be, you know, the distance. She wasn't able to close that distance effectively. Unsuccessful with her takedown attempts. Was mainly in a technique type of fight, which didn't really suit her. The opponent, Lara Procopio, comes into this matchup 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Debuted against a fighter we're going to break down in the next fight, Rosa. Thinking back to that fight, it was pretty close. Nothing really stands out to me too much from Lara's game though. She does have a great training camp in Brazil, but she's early in her career. She was more than happy to stand and trade in the pocket with Rosa, so it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out for her if she's game to trade punches in the pocket with a scrapper like Molly Mccann. I'm going to side with Molly Mccann. She's got more experience at this point. Her punching power has always been a standout in her game. Her toughness, her determination. There's just more that stands out from Molly Mccann, in my opinion. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to take Molly via decision. My numbers would be Molly -170, Lara +140. And the actual numbers, we've got Molly coming in -150, Lara +130. So I'm overpricing Molly Mccann just by a little bit. But yeah, I'm happy to do that, man. I think Molly Mccann, this one suits her. I can see her having more of a scrap than a technique type of fight. Lara, in her debut, you know, good performance against Rosa. But Molly Mccann, she's down to scrap. You know, this one should be a good one. Could Lara cash as a plus underdog? Man, maybe she can. This one is a close one, but I'm favouring Molly Mccann. Rosa taking on Joselyne Edwards, and we're going to start with the Brazilian, Rosa. So Rosa comes into this matchup 2-0 inside the UFC, primarily a striker. Her kickboxing in both of her UFC fights so far, really solid. Kicking equally as damaging as her boxing. Those low kicks she likes to whip you with, really impressive. Dustin Poirier mood, you know. Rosa has some good grappling from what we've also seen against Vanessa Melo. But that's Vanessa Melo, you know. Not exactly a Damian Maia of the female world. The opponent, Joselyne Edwards, comes into this matchup 1-0 inside the UFC. Debuted just a few days ago against the kicker, Yanan Wu. I was quite impressed with Joselyne. Showed us a lot of her game, a bit of everything. offering BJJ from her back when taken down. Boxing looked pretty good. She slowed down towards the end of the fight, but she's young in her career, only getting better. She was pretty clinchable, but with the jiu-jitsu she had to offer from her back, doesn't seem like she minds hitting the mat. For me, I'm gonna side with the Brazilian in this one. I took Joselyne as an underdog for her debut. I was impressed, but I would be way more impressed if she can cash as an underdog again with a win over Rosa. She definitely could, because Joselyne has some good wrestling, good boxing and BJJ like we just said. But Rosa has a very solid kickboxing background too, that I do see being more of a problem than Joselyne Edwards. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to take Rosa via decision. My numbers would be Rosa minus 180, Joselyne plus 150. We've got Rosa over minus 200. Joselyne Edwards returning plus 200. That line is that's a big difference in that line. A lot of money going on Rosa. Kind of hard to argue with it too. I mean, Joselyne Edwards, don't get me wrong. Her debut, pretty impressed. But Rosa has only impressed me. And I think this is a better matchup for Rosa than it is Edwards. But if Edwards can get it done this time, oh boy. Justin James taking on Devonte Smith. And we're going to start with Justin. So Justin comes into this one 1 win, 2 losses inside the UFC. We're all familiar with what Justin James did to introduce himself to us. That debut against Frank Camacho, nasty. Went in there, bulldozed Camacho. Since then, he's actually been in a couple of matchups, right? He's been in a couple of fights. Fatigued and finished by Tucker. Had a good fight with Benitez, but again, fatigued and finished. It's clear that Justin James has to use his energy in a better way. But then again, if the right punch lands during that using of energy, then it looks like what it did in the debut. Devonte Smith comes into this matchup 2 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. It's been a few seconds since we've seen Devonte. He was knocked into another realm by Karma Worthy. That's the last thing we remember from Devonte Smith. That fight alone kind of shows us that Justin James does have a puncher's chance. However, if it doesn't go down like that, it's probably because Devonte is better at using his energy. He's better at picking his openings. Devonte's chin will need to hold up. I think that's the biggest concern in this matchup. For me though, I do still feel more confident taking Devonte. I think his striking skill set is at a higher level than Justin James, but it's the chin, right? Can his chin take that bomb from Justin James? Personally, I wouldn't like to bet and find out, but I am going to side with Devonte via TKO in round number 3. My numbers, minus 160 on Devonte, plus 130 on Justin James. And the actual numbers, Devonte minus 300, Justin James plus 220. Yeah, I disagree. I disagree with that. Devonte, man, like he's been out for a few seconds, quite a few seconds. And he was slept in his last one. Now, that's not to say that Justin James is going to go in there and do what Karma Worthy did, but at plus 250, plus 240, he could. I mean, it's only one punch that has to land, right? If we're talking about who's better over 15 minutes, who's better at finding openings, who uses energy better, yeah, in my opinion, all of that is Devonte. But at minus 300, yeah, I'm not going to be betting it. Tima Valiev taking on Martin Day. And we're going to start with the Russian, Tima. So Tima comes into this matchup 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. His debut was looking great. It looked like he was in there with a guy who was nowhere near his skill level. And in all honesty, I still believe that. Composure though, the composure was not at a high level. He just needed to chill out a little bit. He hit the opponent with so many strikes, so many different techniques. It kind of reminded me of Agapova, who tried to beat Dobson inside 60 seconds. Like, yo, bro, calm down. Just calm down. You're doing really good. You're doing awesome. You're absolutely obliterating the opponent, but you're getting a little bit reckless. Just calm down. He didn't calm down. He ended up getting clipped and finished himself. Sometimes that's just how fighting goes. The opponent, Martin Day, comes into this matchup 0 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker. Now, I was just speaking about composure with Tima. I believe Martin Day probably has better composure despite being 0 wins, 3 losses. But then we look at the striking skill level between these guys. It's pretty clear that Tima possesses way more striking ability than Martin Day. This is still kind of a little bit of a difficult matchup to predict. Martin Day has been overwhelmed before, especially by Davey Grant, who was happy to pour it on Martin Day. So if Tima for some reason doesn't want to chill and just wants to go 0 to 100, it probably could work out as much as it did in his debut, but getting the finish this time, you know? Which basically nearly came in the debut anyway, but somehow ended much different. If he can show a bit of composure to slow down, read the opponent, then I'd be impressed. But yeah, whatever way Tima wants to go in there and approach this one, I do believe he can win this fight. Martin Day hasn't picked up a win yet, probably due a win. We saw Vanessa Melo 0-3 get a first win. Could this be a similar case? You know, Marcin Prachnio, that's another one that I mentioned, 0-3 could be the first win. For me though, I'm not too sure it's going to be. I think Tima showed a lot of positives in the debut despite the loss, and I am going to side with the Russian again. So I'll take Tima Valiev via TKO in round number 2. My odds, I'd put Tima at least a 2-1 favourite at -200. Martin Day +170. And the actual numbers, we've got Tima touching -400, which is a little bit crazy. If Tima can do everything that he did in the debut and not get clipped, this is going to be a good fight for him, you know? Slow down a little bit, in my opinion. Maybe 0 to 70 rather than 0 to 100. But yeah, for me, I'm going to take the Russian. Mike Rodriguez taking on Danilo Marques. And we're going to start with Mike. So Mike Rodriguez comes into this matchup 2 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. If you count the loss against John Allen. I'd like to say Mike is primarily a striker. Hasn't had a lot of success with his striking, but that's usually because he's being taken down by the opponent or starched by the opponent if your name is Jung. We do have to admit that Mike Rodriguez won every second of his last matchup until Ed Herman was able to pull off a Kimura. Yeah, Ed Herman pulling off Kimuras. Unbelievable. The opponent, Danilo Marques, comes into this matchup 1-0 inside the UFC. Quite evidently a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Had a lot of success at establishing his grappling against Hadis in his debut. This one is pretty clear to me, guys. Danilo is going to shoot takedowns and look to clinch Rodriguez up against the fence. Mike Rodriguez will simply look to clip the chin of Danilo. If Ed Herman can Kimura Mike Rodriguez, make no mistake, Danilo can probably pull off any type of submission that he's going to search for. It's really one or the other. Danilo has success with his grappling, or Mike TKOs Danilo. For some reason, I'm going to take Mike to clip him. Am I going to bet it? Absolutely not. But that's going to be the pick, man. I think Mike Rodriguez, he's a much better striker. He's a much better puncher than Danilo. For the moments that he is upright, I think he could clip him. So, Yeah, I'm going to take Mike via TKO in round number 1. My numbers, Mike Rodriguez minus 150, Danilo plus 120. And the actual numbers, we got Mike for some reason minus 250, which is crazy. Danilo plus 200. Now, I say it's crazy. If both of these guys just stand and trade and that's it, yeah, Mike Rodriguez minus 250. But if both of these guys go to the mat and that's it, you stay on the mat, I'm putting Danilo minus 250, right? It's one or the other. For some reason, I'm liking Mike Rodriguez. I'm not going to put any money on it though, so yeah. I do hope that Mike can perform though. You know, it looked good against Ed Haman. It looked really good. But the Kimura, it came out of nowhere and it got him. So yeah, he's going to have to watch out for some jiu-jitsu. Michael Johnson taking on Clay Guida. Oh my good God, what a matchup this is. And this is the last fight on the prelims. So let's start with Michael Johnson. Michael comes into this matchup with a veteran's record, primarily a boxer and wrestler. MJ, man. Let's take a look at Michael's recent matchups and speak about what's been happening with this guy. Right, so let's go all the way back to Khabib, right? Michael Johnson was able to clip Khabib, ended up losing that fight. Michael Johnson then fought Justin Gaethje. He was able to wobble Justin. He went on to lose that fight. Then he went to fight Elkins at 145, making his debut, blown out of the water. Then against Feely, he won a split decision, but I actually felt that Feely won that. Lobov, you know, that's a mandatory win over the GOAT. Good job there. Josh Emmett, he was winning the whole fight. He was seconds away from a decision win, put into a new realm. Stevie Ray probably won that matchup, but got dominated so bad in the third round. The judges just, you know what, Michael, I'm not even going to give you the win here. Thiago Moises won the first round, ends up losing. So it's pretty clear to us that MJ just finds a way to lose matchups. Despite any success that comes his way in a fight, he just somehow finds a way to lose. So to say Michael Johnson is a banker, is a sure bet in this one, you know, you'd have to be crazy to say that. There could be a way that Michael Johnson loses this matchup. The opponent, Clay Guida, comes into this matchup with a veteran's record. The cardio of Clay Guida will always be impressive. Endless takedown attempts if he's favouring that type of matchup. Clay Guida, man, just a legend, just a veteran. Just a guy that we all appreciate, you know. Clay Guida could potentially drown Michael Johnson late in this fight, the way Stevie Ray did. Definitely a possibility with Michael Johnson. I think Michael would have to use his wrestling, show it's good enough, and obviously score with his boxing on the feet. It's not a safe one to bet on. I'm definitely not going to bet it. But I am, again, like some of you, I'm going to put a little bit of faith into Michael Johnson to get a nice TKO. He hasn't had a TKO in a while. The win over Feely, decision. The win over Lobov, decision. I'm going to take Michael Johnson not only to stop the rot, but to get a TKO too. The pick is going to be Michael Johnson via TKO, round number 1. My numbers, Michael Johnson minus 180, Clay Guida plus 150. And the actual numbers, we've got Michael over minus 200. A lot of crazy money. We're crazy people sometimes. We know how unreliable Michael Johnson is, but we've got him over minus 200. Clay Guida coming back plus 180. Guys, I know you're already nervous. If you're betting on Michael Johnson, I know the nerves have already started, right? Let's go, Michael. Let's go, my bro. All right, the homies. You know what time it is. If you waited to smoke with me, amen. If you've been smoking this whole time, double amen. If you're not a smoker, but you enjoyed the smoke breaks, triple amen, gang. Let's go. I haven't said it yet, but if you haven't hit the Hamzat button, please go and touch it up. Head kick, submission, whatever you're wanting to do to the like button, go ahead and do that. Subscriber on the last card left a comment saying, I just got my first submission on the like button. So yeah, shout out to that guy. Now, you know, he's evolving with that like button, finding submissions now. Really nice to see. I hope you've all been blessed, guys. I hope you're all doing great. What have I got to say to you? Weed strain, Skywalker Haze. Do any of you guys know about this strain? If you smoked this strain, if you're familiar with this strain, let me know. I recently got some Skywalker Haze, so yeah, it's decent. I like it. Okay, so motivation and philosophy. For this week, a bro messaged me on Instagram. I get quite a few messages on Instagram here and there. Some are, well, most of them are, you know, we're speaking about fights on a weekly basis leading up to the fight night. But I also get, you know, a bunch of appreciation messages and also messages regarding motivation and philosophy and that type of stuff too. Now, last smoke break I mentioned, you know, if anyone has a topic or a subject or anything that you would like me to personally speak about, be sure to drop it in the comments. But this bro followed the Instagram, shout out to you for doing that, and personally messaged me for a smoke break topic. So I'm not going to name you, but you know who you are, and I am going to read part of the message too. Thank you for that message, by the way, bro. Really, really nice message. So the message reads, if I could ask for a smoke break topic, could you speak a little on how to stay motivated and focused during hard times, and also what to do when things go wrong and you may feel hopeless? Maybe too vague, but it's what I've been thinking about lately. And yeah, so the bro that messaged me that, great message, right? And not only is this type of advice that I'm going to give today potentially going to help you, I know for sure that this message right now, straight away, has already hit a bunch of people listening, right? Not everyone, because a lot of people, they're on track right now. They're still on track, but you seem like you have, you know, you've been thinking about this. And a lot of people, maybe a lot, are going to be feeling this way too. So not only is this going to connect to you, hopefully, it's going to connect to more people. So I'd like to thank you for that. There's many reasons to keep yourself motivated, to keep yourself going on the journey, but I'm going to give you my favorite reason. One man will tell you a bunch of reasons, another man's going to tell you another bunch of reasons to keep yourself motivated. But for me, this is the sweetest way to keep yourself motivated, my bro. The sweet taste of I did it. Right? That's why. You know how sweet it's going to taste when you achieve everything that you want to achieve. It's going to taste real, real sweet. The fact you had to work for it. The fact you had days, many, many days where you just felt like, man, I got to keep going. That's what's going to taste sweet, my bro. The fact that you had nothing handed to you. The fact that it's going to taste so, so sweet. That's why you keep yourself motivated. You want to know one day what it's like to achieve your dreams and goals. You don't know what it's like right now. You think you know what it's like. You visualize what it'll be like. But don't you want that visualization to be a reality rather than a visualization? You do. And that's why you're going to keep yourself motivated. Just the feeling of, wow, I did it. I really did it. That alone, my bro, is going to taste so, so sweet. You know, that alone keep you motivated. That should keep you motivated. But you've got to have that mindset. The mindset of not backing down, not giving up, not allowing anyone or anything to take you off the journey, not allowing yourself to take you off the journey. Because let me tell you this, your own worst enemy, it's yourself. When you start to doubt yourself, when you start to lose motivation and inspiration, it can be easy to stop what you're working on. But if you wake up tomorrow like a man possessed, a man who's not willing to give up or back down, nothing can stop you. So that's my message to you, man, and I hope that connected with you. I'd also like to thank you again for reaching out to me and asking me to speak about motivation. I believe that you can achieve anything you set out to achieve, but ultimately, bro, it doesn't matter if I believe you. It doesn't matter if anyone believes you. There's only one person that must believe, and you know who that is. It's yourself. Adversity will hit you on the way. Don't allow yourself to add to adversity. Don't be your own adversity. You know, you want that taste of I did it. You want that feeling. And knowing that you've worked for it, you know, that alone, man, that's got to be your motivation. So wake up tomorrow like a man possessed and don't get in your own way, because other things are going to get in your way. Don't add to it. You want that feeling of I did it. That's your motivation. That's my message to you. So amen to the gang. If you ask Google, if you ask another man, if you ask whoever, they're going to tell you different things. And the different things that you get told are also, you know, good reasons. You know, there's a lot of reasons. But for me, bro, it's that sweet taste of I did it. I want that. You want that. There's a lot of people listening that want that. So make sure you get that. It's a visualization now, but you want the feeling, and you're going to get that feeling. My Instagram's been on screen. If you're not homies outside of YouTube, we can do that on Instagram at UFCLEY. I hope you guys have had a nice smoke break. There's an animation coming to the channel. A few of you guys may have seen it on Instagram, but that animation is going to come to life. I'm going to put that before the smoke break. Hopefully next week. Alright guys, make sure you drop down your strains that you're smoking. And if you have a topic for me to speak on, as always, drop that in the comments or you can personal message me. Alright homies, let's get into the main card. Diego Ferreira taking on Beneil Dariush. This is a difficult one, man. We're going to start with Diego. So Diego comes into this matchup 8 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Super high level BJJ. As for Diego's striking, it's come a long way. This dude can definitely strike, but that's never going to be his most dangerous ability. His grappling will always be the most dangerous. The opponent, Beneil Dariush, comes into this fight 13 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Also primarily a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Super high level BJJ, just like his opponent. Dariush also has some decent striking. You only have to look at the way he put out Scott Holtzman, ninja style. But Beneil, just like Diego, will still always be most dangerous when he's grappling. If I had to pick who the better striker is, I'd probably lean towards Diego Ferreira. Seems a little bit more composed, not as erratic as Beneil. Either guy has the ability to find a submission, but both guys are so wise that it's unlikely, right? I think this one plays out in the kickboxing. I favour Diego's striking and his chin. You know, the chin also may be a better chin than Beneil. So purely for those 2 reasons, I'm going to take Diego Ferreira via TKO in round number 2. And this is a rematch. You know, this is a rematch. So it's either history or we're going to get a new result. I think we're going to get a new result in this one. My numbers would be Diego minus 140. I'd put Beneil plus 110. The numbers though are closer than that. We've got basically minus 110 each side. Beneil is a plus 100, but he's starting to turn into a minus. And that's completely fair. You know, both of these guys, really high level BJJ, and their striking has come a long way too. So yeah, how do you even pick this one? I'm going to pick the Brazilian side, but it's either way. You know, both of these guys, great grappling, pretty decent striking. Whoever shows up is going to be the winner. For me, Diego. Cody Stamann taking on Askar. And we're going to start with Cody. So Cody Stamann comes into this matchup 5 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw inside the UFC. Primarily a wrestler with some good pressure boxing to go with his wrestling. Cody has always used his wrestling. Even in matchups that he's lost, he's always tried to grapple the opponent. It should be no different here. Askar comes into this matchup 11 wins, 1 loss as a pro, making his UFC debut on super short notice. Askar will be fighting at 145, which is 10 pounds above his natural weight class. I've only seen a couple of fights, and he doesn't look that bad. The main concern is preparation. Is Askar prepared for an opportunity on such short notice? I think this fight should play out similar to how Ricky Simón versus Perillo played out. If Cody Stamann goes to his foundation of wrestling, I think there's a clear path to victory. Ricky Simón, similar against Perillo, clear foundation with his wrestling, and that's what he did. So I'm going to take Cody Stamann via submission in round number 2. My numbers would be Stamann minus 200, Askar plus 170. And the actual numbers, wow. We've got Cody Stamann minus 400, minus 450, all the way up to minus 500. Askar coming back over plus 300. So a lot of money is saying that Askar isn't going to be prepared for this opportunity. And I'd have to agree, you know, if Cody Stamann does go to his wrestling and just looks to wrestle this guy, yeah, I think there could be a stoppage or a clear dominant decision win. Alexander Pantoja taking on Kape, and we're going to start with the Brazilian Pantoja. So Pantoja comes into this one 6 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC, primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter. Really high level jiu-jitsu. The striking is kind of inconsistent. You look at his performance on the feet against Brandon Moreno, you're thinking, wow, this dude is a clean striker. And then you look at the stand-up against Figueiredo, and you're thinking, this guy should only grapple. Against Askarov, the same thing. The striking just wasn't clean enough. Became very fatigued towards the end of that matchup too. The opponent, Kape, comes into this one 15 wins, 4 losses as a pro, making his UFC debut. A much different fighter to Pantoja. Kape has some dangerous boxing, big knockout power in his hands. He's just looking to starch anyone who steps foot into the octagon with him. Of course, the level of competition he's fought hasn't been that of the level of Pantoja, but as I always say, you can only fight who's put in front of you. Pantoja would be extremely wise to look for a takedown. Kape would be extremely wise to land a big punch before that takedown comes. If you think Kape gets taken down, I'd probably advise you to bet on the Brazilian. There is a chance that he could submit Kape. If you think Kape stays on the feet long enough to clip Pantoja, then I'd advise betting on Kape. For me, I'm preferring Kape to find that knockout punch. Even if he survives a round or 2 on the mat, if he can, I think he could potentially finish Pantoja later in that fight. So for me, I think Kape eventually finds that knockout punch. So I'll take Kape via TKO. Now, of course, Pantoja also, he could find a submission. But for me, I think this is going to be my first plus pick. And it is plus 110 on Beneil Kape, minus 130 on Pantoja. I would agree with those numbers. I'd agree with them. I think Kape, rightfully an underdog. You know, he's debuting against a really, really decent, experienced UFC fighter. But this is going to be no walk in the park for Pantoja. You know, he does have to get that takedown. If he stands with Kape, the boxing could be too much. Co-main event, my homies. We've got Corey Sandhagen taking on Frankie Edgar. This is a great co-main event. We're going to start with Corey. So Corey comes into this co-main, 6 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. One of my favourite fighters, man. This dude really is the modern day Dominic Cruz. His unorthodox movement is a problem for anyone who isn't able to take him down. The striking is next level. He's the new era, taking on a guy from the old era. The opponent, Frankie Edgar, comes into this matchup with a veteran's record. We all know what Frankie is about. He's a quality wrestler, a guy that can box, a guy that proved that against Pedro Munoz with constant boxing combinations throughout that whole fight. Corey Sandhagen has the size to be a problem for Frankie Edgar, in my opinion. The striking is an area I would definitely expect Corey to win. So that leaves Frankie with the game plan of taking Corey to the mat and basically replicating that performance he had against Yair with that ground and pound. But in my opinion, I think Corey Sandhagen is a brilliant jiu-jitsu fighter that's also pretty crafty when it comes to scrambling and grappling. So even if Frankie tries the takedown game, I think Corey finds a way back to his feet and straight back to the striking. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Corey Sandhagen via decision. This would probably be my most confident pick. I'd put Corey Sandhagen minus 250, Frankie Edgar plus 220. And the actual numbers are deeper. We've got Corey Sandhagen minus 400. Frankie Edgar plus 300. It's hard to argue though, man. It is. It's hard to make a case for Frankie Edgar. The striking, I just see it going towards Corey. You know, that movement, so unorthodox. I think it's going to be a problem for Frankie. But if Frankie can prove me wrong and just keep wrestling Corey Sandhagen, then once again we see why this old school veteran is still competing at the highest level. I'm not sure that's going to happen though. I think Corey Sandhagen is really crafty when it comes to grappling. So yeah, I do expect Corey to stay upright, and I think he's going to have a lot of success against Frankie Edgar. Alright, main event homies. If you've enjoyed the breakdowns, if you enjoyed the smoke break, make sure you hit the like button. That's basically your way of telling YouTube that I enjoyed this. Keep promoting this. We've got Alistair Overeem taking on Alexander Volkov. And we're going to start with the Reem. A legend of the game. This dude has been fighting for over 20 years. That's a lot of experience. Arguably his last run at the heavyweight title. You have to admire this man's determination to keep fighting, to keep being able to compete at the highest level. And I'd like to just quickly mention, you know, about the smoke break. You want that sweet taste of I did it. Alistair Overeem wants that sweet taste of I did it. He wants to be heavyweight champion. He wants that sweet taste. His training at Team Elevation has kept him at the highest level. You look at the groundwork late against Sakai. It really shows that Team Elevation is working great with Alistair Overeem. There's no doubt in my mind that Overeem has a game plan to win this fight. Deciding what the plan will be, that's the question we've got to ask ourselves. The opponent, Alexander Volkov, comes into this matchup 6 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. One of the best heavyweight boxers at distance, in my opinion. Volkov has a lot of experience, maybe not as much as Overeem, but the experience level is definitely up there. I really enjoyed the teeps to the body that Volkov had in his last matchup. Definitely shows how good he is at distance. He may need to use that in this matchup. I think the plan for Overeem will be to push Volkov up against the fence. If he can get a takedown here or there, I think he'll also take them too. If he's got to kickbox, I'm sure he'll offer a lot there too. The game plan for Overeem will most likely be to completely mix it up. A bit of everything, you know? As long as he doesn't just stay kickboxing, he's got a good chance in my opinion. On the flip side, I think if Volkov can keep this fight at distance, he's got the boxing speed to cause Overeem some problems. In my opinion, guys, this is a super 50-50 fight. Who the hell knows type of main event. I'm definitely not going to be betting on it. If I had to pick, I'd say Volkov via decision. But absolutely, I wouldn't be surprised if Overeem used his clinch game, used his Muay Thai knees, got a few trips, a bit of ground and pound, a little bit of control time up against the fence, and ended up winning a close decision. You know, I would not be surprised at all. Because Overeem is a guy that his determination is still there. He's still evolving. He's still getting better at team elevation. But Volkov, man, he's a tough guy. He's a tough guy with good boxing. So this main event, really, really good main event. My numbers, -110 each side. I think this is the most difficult fight to predict on this card. And the actual numbers, I disagree. I disagree with Volkov being -190, -180. I think it's way closer. Alistair Overeem coming back +160 should realistically be no more than +120. I mean, that's what he's showing us in his last few matchups. Getting that training in, you know, with Curtis Blades, the ground and pound, the grappling. This, if he chooses to use that game plan, he really could beat Volkov. But Volkov has to keep the distance. And that could be hard in the small octagon, right? This main event is fire. Who the hell knows? For me, the Russian, but Overeem, man. As always, guys, I've enjoyed making these predictions. I've enjoyed breaking down fights. If you want to be homies outside of YouTube, we can do that at Instagram. Alright, guys. Catch you on the next one. Peace.